My conversation today on Behind the Act is with Dave Grossman. He's a woodworker, an artist, and a serial entrepreneur. And today we're talking about finding beauty in the flaws of ourself, other people, and our art, as well as how Dave aligns his creative ventures with positive social impact. I'm Seth Schaefer. This is Behind the Act with Dave Grossman. Last time I was here visiting you, I walk in and you had transducers glued onto a foam board and you were making speakers, but that's right after you made a table for somebody out of a log that fell in their yard. And then you showed me earrings that you made out of cutoffs that you sell at the Colorado National Monument. And we met because you were part of the Colorado River Fest. And then I joined along on that journey. And this is a long way to say, I see you as a creative journeyer that always has an emphasis in doing something having to do with making the world a better place. So what drives you to be both creative and have an eye on community impact?
I have innate creative drive that I've only recently come to terms with. And I'm still trying on the cloak of artist as an idea. But I look back and I've always been creating things. Sometimes it's creating businesses, sometimes it's creating events, sometimes it's creating short written pieces.
Didn't you at one point have a tech company as well?
I did, yeah. I had a .com business in the dawn of .coms. We made cool skateboard videos, got to work with amazing athletes at a time when action sports was really just starting to hit its stride as far as a kind of a commercial entity.
Okay.
We created a network of websites that focused on instructional content. So how to do a kickflip on a skateboard and how to do a backflip on a snowboard and how to do a dynamic move on rock climbing. They were all kind of parts of my past. And my brother, who is the co-founder in the business called Athletic Motion, we were talking on the phone one day and he asked me this question. He said, "Dave, remember how we used to watch the skateboarding video over and over and over until the tape wore out?" So that dates us, VHS tape. "And then remember how we used to watch the snowboard video over and over and over until that tape wore out?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he said, "Could we do that online?" This was in 99. So the internet was this interesting new thing that was just emerging. And I'd been working at a fly shop, and because the guiding season was seasonal, during the off season, I made their creative magazine, which we turned into like a journal where we told stories and had cool photography. And I approached them with this idea that we should have a website. And they were like, "A what?"
Yeah.
I was like, "A website so people can find us and buy stuff from us." And they're like, "Wow, that's an interesting idea. Let me think about that." So I was creating those things. And when my brother called me and we were talking over this idea, I was like, "Yeah, let's do this." We wrote a business plan, had a client who had incredible chops in the technology world. He was taking a fly tying class with me, and we went and had a beer after class one day, and he was like, "Hey, Dave, if you ever have any interesting ideas that you want to try and do something with, let me know." And I said, "Well, actually, I've been writing this plan with my brother. Would you mind giving us some feedback?" Sent that to him, and he called me the next morning, like 6 a.m., and said, "Dave, this is amazing. When can you get on an airplane to go to Silicon Valley?" I was like, "Well, I should buy pants because I have shorts and waders. That's my repertoire for clothing." Yeah. So long story short, I've been doing creative, interesting things for myself mostly. And I've had the opportunity to kind of take those into a bigger stage a few times. And I feel super lucky. And yeah, I don't really, like I said, I'm trying to understand myself as an artist. And that feels still weird to me, but looking back, I think that's actually what I do and what I am.
Right.
At least part of it.
How do you see, okay, so I'm just making observations here. You run events and volunteer on nonprofit boards, and you always engage in nonprofit environment. And obviously foam core boards with transducers making speakers is not a way to develop community support, but it's a way for you to entertain exploring new ideas of how to be creative and build things and make things. But also, for example, you build the earrings from cutoffs that would otherwise be thrown away, and you figure out how to repurpose that into a thing that can help support the local community. You know, like I feel like you have maybe two ideas in your brain that you juggle a lot, but you merge them, and I want to explore what that is.
Yeah, I look at everything through the lens of the context of our global world and society, but I think even more so the health of our world. I have kids, so that certainly drives that. But back in the late 80s, I really got interested in environmental ideas. I was interested in science. And I think if you have, whoa, cool.
So
Speaking
loud.
of science.
I know. Air pressure buildup in the coffee cup.
Very interested in science, and I wanted to better understand the world, and I think that led me to a green approach to life. I couldn't live in this world without understanding how I'm negatively impacting it and how I'm working to positively impact that. So yeah, anytime I have an opportunity to do something interesting or create something interesting, I try and understand what kind of negative and positive impact that has in the world. So when I build a piece of furniture, I have a lot of scrap left over. And being somewhat of a pack rat, I store that scrap and I look for opportunities to use that in different ways. So I make earrings out of the trims off of my coasters, which are the trims off of my charcuterie boards, which are the trims off of my tables and desks and bigger pieces. And the wood that I start with there isn't classic furniture making hardwoods. I salvage trees that are unloved, mostly nearby, so I don't have to drive a long ways to get them. I find that they're really interesting pieces of wood that have all kinds of character. They've lived hard lives, so they've acquired lots of battle damage, scars and embedded metal and all kinds of things.
Which translates into the furniture as what?
As a direction, an artistic direction, something that I can take and focus on or emphasize or de-emphasize. Yeah, it's a platform for creative expression. And I kind of feel like it's me and the tree finding this unique path for each piece.
Yeah.
Where if you're trying to make a dresser or something classically furniture framed, you want nice, good, clean wood. Easy to work with, reliable. I want the opposite of that. I want things that challenge me, that I have to figure out how to stabilize them, or have to fill it with resin, or use a spar, an inlay to hold this piece of wood together. I find that's really a fascinating process, and I like how it looks. Try and bring a more modern aesthetic to classically rustic conditions. So, yeah, for me, artistically challenging, that is kind of my personal thing. I really like that. And I contrast that with most of my other efforts are helping people, bringing people together in events or in a learning journey. So I guide on a mountain bike, I guide and instruct on paddleboards, to try and help people learn those skills, feel more confident. Often that's really what I'm focused on. And then I try and take that effort. And so it's not just between me and the individual client, but it's also benefiting the community. So I help people understand as we're riding down a trail that this is a fragile landscape, and that if they fall in love, I understand that if they fall in love with that landscape, they love that trail, if they have a great day, then they're much more willing to think positively about Grand Junction, about Western Colorado, and become a defender of this landscape, and see this as a place that needs protection and support, and that it's easy to love it too much and hurt it, or it's easy to neglect it and use it as just an extractive resource. I've had some really exciting opportunities to do that kind of work, and I feel super thankful and appreciative of those.
I love that. That kind of answered a question a little bit that I was about to kind of go into, and I realize that we're wading into scary waters with this question potentially, but how do you, in a world that doesn't generally, or let's say proactively, collectively honor environmental concerns? And I'm not talking about just environmental. So I'm more thinking conceptually, how do you help people understand better how you think? Aside from what I'm going to say would be the cliche of like, live the way that you preach, right? Which you do. Like, for obviously we all have varying levels of that, right? But and the other way, I guess another way to ask it is, how would somebody successfully help you change your mind about something too? Like, I'm just thinking generally, how do any of us help have a positive, non-amygdala activating approach to helping other people understand at least where we're coming from?
Yeah. That's something I really see as a huge challenge in our society. We don't have a social structure that makes that kind of default behavior. It's not encouraged. It's kind of, we draw our lines, and you're a Raiders fan or you're a Broncos fan, and don't get near each other because you're going to beat each other up. I'm not a big American football fan, but
yeah, but I agree with you.
So one of the things that I really like, I'm trained as a biologist. I really like about science is that in science, we make a hypothesis, and we work hard to defend that hypothesis and test that hypothesis. And if we're working as an effective, appropriate scientist, when we have new information, we are also really quick to abandon that hypothesis and make a new one, adopt the new information and use that as our directive force. That's something that I constantly try and engage in. I'm an outspoken person about a bunch of different topics, and I try and do it in a manner that that shares the core ideas, but also invites others to ardently defend their position or idea, put forward their idea, so that I can learn from that, so that I can say, oh, wow, yeah, that is much better idea than just mine. I'm going to move towards that, maybe adopt it wholeheartedly, or maybe incorporate big components of that into my thinking. An example, I formed with a group of other people an organization called the Grand Valley Trails Alliance. And it was a project to help a bunch of distinct trail user groups that had frequently been in conflict with one another, help them to see each other not as rivals or enemies, but to see the commonalities and find common ground, so that we could, instead of here and in many communities, trail groups will be fighting with each other for a landscape, for a project, for attention, for dollars, whatever it is, right, and undercutting one another's efforts. And I went out into the community talking with all these different trail groups, and the first reaction was, hell no, you're crazy. Why would I ever want to deal as a runner? Why would I ever want to deal with a motorcyclist? As a ATVer, why would I ever want to do anything that made it easier for wilderness advocates to do what they want to do?
And just for context, for people that aren't from around here or don't know, for example, there was a part of town that was largely known to be used for motorcycle use. Like as a kid, I know we were out there riding, and now it's entirely taken over by mountain bikers, and you're not allowed to ride motorcycles where it was. And I have no political statement or belief, but just for context, like there are entire groups that are no longer allowed to use certain trail systems in order to amplify other groups' use of it, right? Or whatever.
There are 10,000 miles of trails in the Grand Valley, and originally, up until the mid-90s, there was very little regulation about who could use what and when they could do it and where the boundaries were. But the land managers, BLM being the primary one, decided that in the 1.6 million acres of public BLM land that is within Mesa County, they needed to start delineating user access and use of these trails. And challenging.
Yeah.
It came out of a conversation I had with a gentleman who's involved with motorcycle trail riders. He and I went to coffee and had a conversation about a specific area, but it was a conversation that was much more generally scoped. And he said, we're about to go to World War III.
Yeah.
And first of all, I'm like, whoa. Okay, that's the opener. That's the context.
Let's
we're talking
avoid
about.
that.
I don't have any good connotations with World War III.
Right.
And I was like, okay, then we don't have much to lose if we're already at the brink of annihilation. Let's try a bunch of other things first. And so he said, all right, yeah, we'll try this. And his organization and a mountain biking organization and the BLM came together and put in some money to help fund this organization called the GVTA, Grand Valley Trails Alliance. And we started the impossible task of getting all these antagonists together. And one of the first things we did is we held a field trip where we went out to some trails, actually the trails that the Motorcycle Trail Rider Association was really up in arms about. At the beginning of the hike, it was the motorcycle people hiking with themselves and the wilderness people hiking with themselves and the mountain bikers hiking with themselves, and there was no mixing. Then we got to lunch, and we were all up enjoying the landscape and the views, and we started just talking about ourselves and our families and what we like to do. And pretty quickly, people had their phones out, and they're showing photographs from their hike with their grandkids or hike with their friends or their latest mountain bike ride or their motorcycle ride. And at the end of it, there were friendships starting to form.
Right.
And these are people that had sat across the table and yelled terrible things at one another, had fought each other's projects, had killed each other's projects. And from that day over the next year, people started to recognize that, yes, I'm a motorcyclist, but 99% of the stuff that I appreciate, the wilderness person appreciates also. Same with the mountain biker, same with the ATV, or same with the horseman.
Yeah.
So personally, I went through that same journey. I grew up mountain biking. I grew up in Durango at the dawn of mountain biking, and so I came with that context. A hiker and a mountain biker totally changed my perspective.
That's so cool.
I saw all the amazing things their groups were doing, all the amazing things individuals were doing for our shared love of the landscape. It nurtured this new dynamic in the valley. We built some trails together, which was a fascinating process,
That's
bringing
so
all these
cool.
different groups together, understanding how our common opportunities, how we overlap in so many different ways, but also understanding that I might be wrong about my held beliefs, how I see the world. And by putting myself in a place where I kind of had to face that, and by putting myself in a place where I had the environment, the framework that changing my mind was okay,
Yeah.
was really rewarding. And so I try and adopt that constantly.
I think it's so important to understand that we all think the way that we think because we landed there for a reason. The correctness of it cannot be 100% accurate for everybody around, obviously, because we all have such varying differences.
Yeah, and it's tough because I think there are some really important issues that we're facing in our society again and again. And I think it's important that people speak out and say, this is what I stand behind. This is who I am. I think that's important and useful. It's also really easy to do that because you just went down this path and now you've got this framework of people around you that also are holding you up in that direction. And so looking at what your idea is from a new perspective, in a new light, man, I think that's really important.
Right. No, absolutely.
And I try and give myself that space to do that over everything.
Right. So I've seen posts. I mean, we all have varying posts of like, aggression and kindness. And earlier you were saying, like to reach out in ways that welcomes feedback and constructive conversation that's, bilateral or something. But then there's also the let me claim to the world how I feel about stuff, which to me is, again, a way to make people feel defensive and angry at times as well. So I guess my question is, which one have you found to be more fruitful? Which ones are for others and which ones are for you, right? To make you feel like I'm actually saying what I mean now, and have those been helpful in conversation later? And I'm sorry, I'm asking 17 questions at once, and how do you then take the similar idea of the trail system where you've got motorcycle groups versus biker groups, that once you put the actual like human to human connection together, like you both are a lot more in line than you think, but you have preconceived ideas about how the other person is until it's less of an idea and more of a human experience,
I think human time is really essential. Spending time with other people, even if you're completely polar opposite politically or religiously or whateverly, spending time with somebody helps prove how much we have in common. I find that social media is not conducive to that.
Right.
Social media and our modern world is so much about actually distancing ourselves from others and compartmentalizing ourselves. And it's not like somebody's doing it to us. We're doing it to ourselves. So you asked for, does my approach work? When I'm among other human beings and can engage in conversation and laugh over our silliness and support one another through our shared challenges, then yeah, I think we can be amazingly flexible and dynamic, adaptable. I mean, that's why we're the peak species on the planet, is that we are really powerful adapters. But if we put in layers of distance through technology, I think it's easy for us to forget that and to lose those connections, lose those commonality threads. So yeah, do I post on social media and with my torch burning and my pitchfork in one hand, and then am I surprised that people aren't like, oh, that's a great idea, Dave. You're right. Yeah, I do that.
In fact, how can they not be convinced?
Yeah, I'm
clear
saying all the truth. I speak nothing but truth.
Right.
I had this really interesting, humbling, disappointing interaction with somebody I like and don't know this person super well, but somebody that we have a lot of commonalities about the Israel-Hamas Palestine conflict, war, genocide, whatever we're in right now. And it started, I posted on social media expressing concern about the state of Israel's behavior and how it was impacting what I perceived to be the terrible downtrodden Palestinian peoples. And she reached out, direct message, and said, "Hey, have you thought about this other perspective?" And in that, she posted college professor's post highlighting some of the things. And I was like, well, cool. I want to hear more about your perspective because what I'm seeing, I haven't been to Palestine or Israel ever or recently.
Right. So you're an expert.
So I am an expert. And so I was like, yeah, tell me what you're experiencing, what you're seeing, what you're feeling. And she didn't. And I was like, man, I gave you this opportunity to help shift me. I want to hear a different perspective. And it came back. She came back with other third-hand perspectives. Yeah. And it showed me that I didn't really accomplish anything in my diatribe. I didn't make a great connection, didn't learn much. Yeah, I mean, I think there's importance and value in new media, in new connectivity opportunities, but I don't think we're doing a really good job at that right now.
Right.
And I think this kind of a conversation is really important because although it's going to be presented on this internet thing that they've invented
back in 1999. Just kidding.
This series of tubes. Yeah, it's really, you and I are having a conversation. We're sharing thoughts and perspectives, and
I love this format because it allows for nuance.
Yeah,
and also someone has to willingly click on it and listen.
Yeah.
And I'm not forcing anybody to listen or engage or, it's available. Guess, granted, I don't know. I just think the longer form allows for the nuance. It's really helpful.
Maybe that's a characteristic of modern content, that it is so distilled, focused.
Mm-hmm. Dave is a creator. He's a new artist, and he likes to help communities. All right. That's Dave. See ya.
I didn't even say anything.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for setting up your shop, Dave. I have a question.
Yeah.
What is an artist?
Yeah, so I think I had this idea that an artist, they set up easels and they were amazing on guitar, piano. They went to school for this. They had a gallery exhibit. So it was always not really about what the person was doing. It was about all the set dressing around them. And I always engaged in lots of creative activities, but it was never in this art thing. So I could never see myself as that type of a person. And so as I started Confluence Woodcraft and started having more of the framework around me, it felt like I could call myself an artist. And then I just, started seeing, oh, wait a minute, that's the box that I'm working in. That doesn't really matter. The box can be nothing. It can be this, it could be that. But really what matters is how I'm working with the material, how I'm seeing the material, the vision I'm projecting onto the materials that I'm playing with. So that's been, and I'm still, it feels pretentious for me to say that I'm an artist, but I think I want to say that I'm an artist.
I'll say you're an artist. I see you as an artist. You're an artist. You're creating art. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, you got it. I have this conversation with artists a lot about the connection of their art to their identity, particularly from older skills of what was younger, like in their life, what they acquired younger in their life. But as you're engaging in new skills, like there's no reason for you to be afraid to put transducers onto styrofoam boards and make speakers, because your identity is not attached to that. You're just curious, and you're able to play. And so I guess I want to ask you, do you have any of those identity fears other than I guess you kind of just said that as you're afraid to identify as an artist, maybe a little bit. But where are your fears coming from?
So I think that I've always been strong in the curiosity department. I'm a dog person, but I think I've got that cat in me. And so, yeah, I've always been fiddling with stuff, inventing things. So as I think now about what an artist actually is, it's that I'm starting to focus on. And I'm allowing all the contextual ideas of being an artist to start to fall away. Now that's I think where my fear is. That's a scary piece to it is. What's the new thing that we've all been talking about, where you're imposter syndrome? Mm-hmm. Like, it's nice to have that word or those words to attach to the fears that I'm that everybody struggles with, that I'm definitely struggling with.
Yeah.
But if I just allow myself to spend time, an hour, looking at a piece of wood, thinking about how I want to add my vision into it, how I want to add my touch into it, then it doesn't feel weird to be an artist. It feels natural and feels like who I am.
Yeah.
And I always address the curiosity, or I always tag the curiosity with a science side of things. Like, I can stand in a river and look at different rocks or different bugs or watch a trout for hours.
Right.
Because I want to understand how they're working and why this rock is this way or why this bug lives here. I love geology. I love all kinds of different scientific subjects. But I think it's the artistic kind of core of me that is a power plant that drives part of that process. So one of my fears has shaped my life. I have a fear of routine, because I feel like anytime I've kind of gotten into a routine, I start to miss things. And so I've set my life up such that I don't do anything the same ever. It's exhausting. It is highly inefficient. I wouldn't recommend it. But it gives me every single day, every minute of every day is like this, whoa, ooh, cool, wow. Like, I don't brush my teeth the same time every day. I don't even brush my teeth every single day. Probably shouldn't say that on camera. But like, even though those simple routines, I don't do that. And I don't do that on purpose, so I can experience the novel, the newness every single day. I lose a lot of things because I forget to put them away, or I'm distracted by a bunch of stuff.
Like the coffee cup that I lost earlier, maybe, unless it's where I think I might have left it.
I see some of the things that I like about myself in you.
There's plenty of that.
Losing your
on
coffee
the routine
cup.
front, I don't think I can, but I have for short periods, like 6 to 9 months kind of thing. But I don't know where that anxiety comes from on my own end, but I think it's a control thing. It's like, if I do that, it usually represents a job that pays me money, but I don't feel safer having someone else dictating whether or not I'm employed than if I'm dictating whether or not I'm employed. But it's sure as hell not easier to make money as a business owner or entrepreneur. But the freedom was worth it to me or something. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm a serial entrepreneur, which I like to say is more dangerous than a serial killer.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard work.
Unless you're eating the Lucky Charms. I don't know where that came from.
I don't know where that came from either. It's awesome. I got a vision of the bowl. It's a big one.
I have a question about that. Okay, so routine, function, art, value, money, and the idea of paying bills while not. There are words that I'm going to say that can indicate an idea of shame and guilt to people that do this stuff, and that's the antithesis of my goal with my next statements. But if you settle, quote unquote, into making the same trinkets over and over and over that are identical and then sell those as some type of a manufacturing process that strips away the passion of the first time you made it or the first 10 times you made it. I guess talk to me about that balance, because that what I'm explaining is an obvious, in a wood shop environment, a way to go is to figure out something that people need, sell it on Amazon, make thousands of them, and use that as a way to at least partially sustain the business. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying it's a way. But the other side, where you are waiting for people to find a willow tree that fell down and you cut it into a table and it's beautiful. That's artistic, unique, and a one-off. You never will do that same piece again. How do you figure out that balance, especially when routine is an enemy?
Yeah, frenemy, maybe.
Frenemy.
Yeah, I was thinking actually about that very specific thing this morning before you arrived. I made an end table out of a huge block of elm that I cut on my big horizontal bandsaw chain sawmill. And as I was cutting it, I saw this ship form, a vessel, a big leviathan of a vessel. And so I cut those dimensions. It's got a bow to the boat. And it's really, I like the piece. It's come together really nicely. And as I'm working on it, I decided that I wanted to use a Japanese flame finishing technique on parts of it. Technique called yakasugi, or sometimes referred to as shushugiban. And that's a process where you char the wood and then rub oil in, and you char the wood and you rub oil in, and it is iterative over and over and over, and there's no fast way to get it done properly. And so as I was rubbing this piece of wood for the 10 millionth time, I was reflecting on how that's really hard to physically, my hands, my arm, I start working ambidextrously so I can get twice the mileage out of my hands. But there's just no way to do it otherwise, and the result is rewarding. So I have struggled to apply that same kind of mental approach to making the same piece over and over and over. But I think that is the same thing. Emotionally, it's the same thing. Doing the hard work, rubbing the wax on, rubbing the wax off. It's hard work, but there is tons of value in that process. There's value in the destination where you arrive, the final product. But there's also amazing value in the actual process of doing it and sticking with it and doing it one more time and then doing it one more time and then doing it one more time. And that helps me identify personally as an artist, that I sat in and did the hard work. I had a vision. I shaped that vision as I went through this journey, and I put in the hard work to make that piece. So I see that in artists, and I see people that put in 96 hours in a drawing or whatever. I can connect to that, and that feels really good at the end, especially.
Yeah, right, exactly.
When I look back, I'm like, wow, 8 hours of rubbing oil into wood.
Yeah.
So
you just said it feels good. Well, at the end, and
but it also feels good in the process too, in a different way. It feels very validating. It feels. Sometimes I tell my clients, I explain to them that I spend so much time with a piece. It feels almost intimate, and then I give them a name, the piece a name, and I don't know what that name is going into it. Sometimes that name changes, but often I will see something in the wood, or I'll have an experience with the wood as I'm working on it, and it'll be like, oh, you're the rabbit. And it can be kind of weird to explain to your client.
I love that you have that ability.
Yeah, well, maybe it's like ability or curse, I'm not sure. Yeah, I name things. I'm a namer.
Yeah.
I name my bicycles. I spend a lot of time with my bicycles. I name the piece of wood that I'm working on, and I talk to it. I have a conversation with it.
Love that.
And it maybe it helps the hard work be a little easier. Maybe it's a defect in my character. I don't know, but it's something that I do, and I feel more connected to the piece at the end. And when I take that piece and I deliver it to the customer, it's kind of painful. I feel sad. I feel proud that like this piece is moving into somebody's house, but I also feel a loss, which is really interesting to me. And I think that's, for me, that's part of my creative process. A bonding, a connection, a relationship with that piece, and then like in life, we have to let go of it at the end, and that is it's hard, but it's also really interesting and it's rewarding.
It's the hardest thing for me and so many other people that I talk to is learning how to and when to finish and release, let go, and be done. Realizing that every piece that you do is not going to be the best piece that you do. And it doesn't mean anything about your identity or capability or anything, but also, I guess, learning to and when to let go. So I guess, can you talk as a say newer artist? I think you've been an artist for a long time, but on these newer pieces or versions of art for you, how have you learned to realize that perfection's fake? And I'm putting words in your mouth, I guess, but that you have to choose the moment that it's like, it's finished, it's done.
I set myself up for a little bit of success when I started Confluence Woodcraft. Having been a digital artist and photographer for a bunch of years, I frequently would struggle with not releasing a piece or completing a piece because it wasn't done, it wasn't perfect, it wasn't ready. And so when I started Confluence Woodcraft, I established a tagline for the business, and that tagline is "Flaws are features." The wood itself that I'm working with is not beautiful, perfect, manufactured plywood or beautiful, perfect straight grain wood. It's not classic heartwood. I'm working with salvaged, beat up,
Naughty wood.
naughty cracked. It's got checks and cracks and splits. It's got funky bits where, bacterial or fungi process.
If I were a wood, this would be.
If I were wood, I would be funky. And so that framework, that context often means that I'm like, well, it is what it is. How can I find beauty in that? How can I find visual interest in that? How can I work to that strength and say this is the feature of that piece of wood, that bark inclusion that if you were a sane furniture maker, you wouldn't use that piece of wood, or you would cut that piece out and you'd patch it. For me, using that, all those interesting focal points that are flaws and thinking them as features helps me get to a point where I'm like, yeah, this piece is awesome. I love it. It's done.
What do you think that, I don't want to force a concept that's not there for you, but do you think that in some ways you're reclaiming versions of yourself through these pieces of wood and their flaws, and like, I want to be honored and I would honor myself and I'd honor the wood?
Shouldn't I be on a couch?
Yeah.
Doctor?
I say I'm projecting a concept.
You're projecting hard on me, dude. I think you're
if
maybe
it's not real, it's
you're
not
reading
even
my
gonna-
palm, but
That's hilarious.
yeah. Flaws are feature, and so when this idea came to me, I started looking at this beyond just wood, and it's the flaws in people that I think make them so interesting, that I connect to, that I am want to engage with.
Yes.
Like think about superheroes. Superheroes are really interesting, but they all have something that is broken or wrong or weird with them. They have a flaw.
Yeah,
and that's what makes them a superhero and makes them interesting and makes it, maybe even more importantly, something that you can connect to.
Yep.
If they're just this perfect being, then boring. Yeah, but I'm not a superhero guy, so I might get these details wrong, but like Superman has a flaw, kryptonite.
Right.
And even though he can fly and spin the world and do all these incredible things, if there's kryptonite, he's fucked. Sorry. But I think that's what makes people interesting.
Yeah.
That they're defective, that they've got a limp, or one of their eyes goes a little weird, or they always have something in their teeth, or like they're stooped over, or they have a weird laugh. Like those are the things that I connect to, that I love.
Or deal with depression and anxiety and fears.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right.
Totally. I think, we've all gone through some really challenging times in the past few years, and that has made, in my small world, that has made people even more interesting.
Yeah.
I think the isolation and the separation and the loss that we experienced in the pandemic helped people. It caused a lot of issues. It brought out a lot of issues, but it also helped people wear those issues as badges. Like, I see there's more conversation about mental health than ever. There's more people accepting and honoring and recognizing these flaws in one another. And damn, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It makes the world a better place.
totally.
As you take flawed pieces of wood and turn them into superheroes. What is the?
I wish they would fly because they're heavy to pick up. So
I mean, you could make but we'll talk about that later. How does your furniture impact people when it impacts them the way you most want it to? Like, I'm certain that people buy the furniture and put them in their second homes and never appreciate them sometimes. But when you get the feedback you want? What is that?
I'm looking for more clients with second homes. Let's just start there.
Well, that's a money thing. Talk about that. But
I have had some, really fun partners in the process, the customers, clients, whatever they are. Great couple. They moved to the Grand Valley from, I think one was living in Denver and one was living in Phoenix. They both had the opportunity to take their jobs remote. This was before the pandemic, and they moved to the Grand Valley, and they live across from the Lunch Loops trail system. So right there, I'm like, okay,
yep.
we're going to get along just fine. They have a really cool house. When they were planning their house, they admitted that the idea of having a big vaulted entryway was really cool. And then they moved in and they're like, this is a waste of space. Why the hell? What were we thinking? And so they came to me with the idea of building a big entryway table. So we went out to my log yard where I have a collection of huge stumps and logs and slabs, and we started looking through things, and we went through a process of picking out the big log that I was going to then mill, and we found a really cool piece. And it's 8 inches thick. It's 40 inches round. It weighs 800 pounds. It tried to kill me a couple times, and it's got this bark inclusion that looks like a lightning bolt, so it got called lightning. And so building that piece, completing that piece, moving that piece into their place, it was an amazing project, really fun. And I see them a lot out on trails, and it's a cool connection. They say that everybody who comes by is just like, oh my gosh. It enhances their life, it enhances their house. And I feel just honored that I had that opportunity and that it sits in their house. Yeah, that's a really cool feeling.
I love that.
And the idea that they've got this flawed, interesting piece of wood in their house that is nicely appointed, beautiful place. I like that too. It feels almost subversive. Like they're both high-level executives in 2 big companies, and the idea that like that's a little virus in their brains that this big funky flawed thing is in their house, I think is super cool.
It's honoring their love for imperfection. Right?
Totally.
Yeah.
And they don't live in a skyscraper in a rigid city. They live across from a super rugged technical trail system. So obviously my virus had very fertile ground.
Nice.
They're a good host. But yeah, I think that's cool. I've got a piece, a donor wall for Mesa County Public Library. They just built a new branch location, and I did salvaged wood bookends, and they're all laser engraved with the donor's name on them. And it's the entranceway for the library, so everybody goes in the library gets to see this. And it's all local wood, so it's like it's a connection to your community in a way that you might not otherwise have. You get to see lots of cracks and spines and knots and interesting character in the wood. You can touch it. It feels very wood. It's not a plastic coated. And so I like to think that that's giving people a little dose of the outdoors, a little dose of chaos, a little dose of art as they walk into a library, which is one of my favorite places in the world. I love libraries, and I love what goes on in libraries. I love what libraries do for our community. Oh my gosh, they are like such a critical pillar in our society. And so to be able to be a part of that is just such an honor.
That's awesome. Yeah. Addressing your aversion to routine.
Yeah.
Knowing you're not going to stick where you're at. What's next for you? And feel free to dream with no limitations on this too. Like what would be your perfect next steps? Pragmatism is boring, so.
Yeah. I'm a serial entrepreneur, so I'm constantly hatching new business ideas, which I think is moderately unproductive, but it's just who I am. And so that's one of my flaws. And I have to kind of just honor that and try not to let it sink me, because I think it has the potential to like undercut an effort, because I'm like, oh, I want to go do that. Oh,
Big time.
I got a great idea there. So I have Confluence Woodcraft. I also have a guiding business called Desert Rat Tours. I'm trying to shape each of those businesses so they're compatible and complementary and satisfy my needs, but also take care of the community needs. Oh, and also maybe make a little bit of money. That would be nice.
It's a really good idea with entrepreneurship. I mean,
I hear that they're supposed to do that. And so I have these two other ideas that are, I think, really good ideas that I'd really like to execute on. But I don't know that there's only one me. And my capacity to pull off big projects is shrinking slowly. So I'm trying to hand those off to other people. I'm trying to seed those into other brains and let them take them and do things with them. My vision for the future is to have a couple different things going, maybe 3 different things going that I can balance somehow. It doesn't have to be a perfect balance, but a balance that I can fight back and forth and find some survivable success that allow me to be outside a bunch, that allow me to have creative expression and allow me to contribute to my community. And if I get to name what I want to do without limits, those are the 3 pieces that I want to check off. I want to have interesting creative expression. I want to be able to be artistic and do things with my hands or with my eyes or with my heart. I want to be outside and on trails and helping share that with people. And I think guiding is a good way for me to do that on the rivers and on trails. And then the last piece is bringing people together and helping the community. And I've done that through events in the past, and I'd like to do that again in the future. And we'll see how that comes together. It's hard, as you know.
I have let's say the last question about entrepreneurship and being a serial entrepreneur, and I self-acknowledge that it might be getting in your way. I have lots of friends that I feel like I'm constantly like, yes, that's a freaking great idea, but just freaking stick with it. Do something. And then you look at me from the outside, and I'm a filmmaker and a podcaster and music and doing all of these things. And I acknowledge that they pull away from each other. How do you identify when it's time to let go of an idea, or when an idea is a great idea, but it's going to get in the way? Or have you learned? I'm just.
I was going to say, I'm still working on learning that lesson.
You're like, tell me more.
Yeah. So I can say no. The problem is that I've been rewarded for having that probably inefficient behavior in the past. And so I'm like, well, yeah, maybe I'm not as effective doing what I'm doing, but if I did it and I did this other thing, I'd be happier.
And you don't have routine.
And I don't have any routine.
Helpful.
Yeah.
And if you have 4 businesses making a quarter of what one big could be, it's fine, right? I mean, if you pay your bills, it's fine.
Yeah.
If you're hitting your financial and output goals, sorry.
Yeah, if I can pay my rent and make my, a little more than break even, then I feel like I'm doing okay. I probably should be more of a capitalist than that, but I'm not. So when I started Athletic Motion, it was all consuming. We got venture funded. Had a huge responsibility of a bunch of staff and
this is the .com.
Yeah, this is the .com business. It was an amazing experience, and I look back at it as nothing but positive. But there were also some traumatic elements to it, some of which I still live with. And I think that shapes my ability to knuckle down and commit through something. Just like rubbing in that oil into that char, there's plenty of times where I set down the rag and I take a break. But then I can go back and continue that process. I do the same in my businesses up to a point. But there's a point where I'm like, okay, I need to move on.
I said last question. I've got one more last question because I keep doing last questions.
Let's do that.
How do you, or why are flaws important in people and art and life?
I think it's the interest piece. It's the thing that I connect to. Maybe it's because I'm flawed. But I think that it provides, in the wood, it provides a vehicle for me to impart some of myself into this, but also within the context of the flaw. In my relationships with people, the same. I think I connect to the flaw. It is a bridge between us. It's something that I can help them with, maybe. It's something that I can help myself with. It's something that bonds us. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, perfect people are lame. I'll go with the flaws people anytime.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider sharing with other people you think might gain value from it. My name is Seth Schaefer. This is Behind the Act.